Are you looking for a way to leverage a podcast to generate cash flow, expand your network, and grow your audience? Well, if that's the case, this video is for you. In today's video, I'd like to share with you some of the biggest mistakes that I have made with my podcast over the last 10 years and what these mistakes cost me, and most importantly, how you, my dear viewer, can avoid making the same mistakes. All right, let's get into it. So some of the most common challenges that founders and podcasters face when creating a podcast is, number one, we don't get enough downloads, and then we don't get enough leads. We're not getting enough engagement, and we're having a hard time creating content on a consistent basis. The good news is if you can overcome those challenges, there's some pretty significant opportunities for you. Number one, you'll start to be seen as an authority figure within your niche. People will be much more likely to buy from you as a result. And you'll be able to create very valuable relationships that can produce a substantial payday, more on that later, if you leverage those relationships correctly. So here is my count them, five biggest mistakes that I've made over the last decade as the host of the Bright Ideas podcast. Number one, not having an editorial calendar. In other words, just kind of taking an ad hoc approach and producing content kind of about this or about this or about this. You don't want to do that. You want to plan out your content in advance. Think about what it is that you're trying to sell, when you want to sell it. If you do product launches or things like that, you want to make sure that you're producing episodes in an order that supports your monetization initiatives. And the way to do that is to have an editorial calendar. Now, mistake number two is not producing content consistently. If you're not producing a show every single week or 3 days a week or whatever it is that you tell your audience to expect, if you start missing out on that, they're gonna start tuning out. Many, many years ago, there was a lot less competition and you could kind of get away with that, but not anymore. You need to be producing content on a regular basis. So how do you do that? Batch it. Build it into your schedule so that over a period, let's say 1 week per quarter or 2 weeks per quarter, that's when you want to do all of your interviews and create all of your content so that you have that content in your production queue so that you can make sure that you're publishing every single week after week after week. Mistake number three is your content is not niche specific enough. People want to be everything to everybody because they don't want to exclude anybody. And this doesn't just apply to having a podcast or anything. It applies to your overall business. The moment you're trying to appeal to everyone, you're a generalist. And when you're a generalist, you really kind of appeal to no one and you're going to be commoditized. So the way around that, and I have made this mistake extensively with my show. As a matter of fact, when I picked the name Bright Ideas, I picked a name that gave me the latitude to kind of go all over the place, which in the beginning I thought was a great idea, but in hindsight, if I was starting another show now, I would pick a much more specific name. Now, fortunately, I can call it the Bright Ideas eCommerce podcast. And if I decide I don't want to do e-commerce anymore, I could call it the Bright Ideas SaaS podcast. So I do have the ability to make it niche. But my point here is this: make sure that you have a very focused audience in mind. And those are the people who you want to be in your community. Those are the people who you want to buy your products. Those are the people that your sponsors are going to want to get access to. So super important to have a very specific audience in mind. That's one of the reasons why, so we get sponsors from time to time for the show. I never reach out to any sponsors. They always approach me, and I think we make about $40,000 or $50,000 a year, somewhere in that neighborhood, from sponsors that come in and buy our sponsorship packages, and I do absolutely nothing other than produce the show to attract those particular sponsors. So number four. Doing audio only and missing out on YouTube traffic. For years and years and years and years, my show was audio only, and I don't know why. In hindsight, maybe I just wasn't paying it. Probably I just wasn't paying attention. But absolutely, video is the way to go. So every single episode that I now record is recorded in a video format, and then my editor, God love him, strips the audio out for iTunes and all the other places that don't support video. But you absolutely want to make sure that you are capturing video so that you can leverage YouTube, because it can be a fantastic source of traffic for you. And then number 5, here we go, we'll unfold that thumb now. Number 5, relying on social media promotion to grow your show. Well, what's the problem with that? Well, the problem is that if you're just doing organic promotion, you're only really showing your show to people who already follow you. So that's not going to do a whole lot to help you to grow your audience. To grow your audience, you need to use either paid social or ideally get yourself on other podcasts. Because if you think about even paid social, someone's got to click an ad and then they've got to go onto their phone and there's a bunch of clicks by the time for them to actually go from clicking that ad to actually listening to the episode. Whereas if you were, say, running an ad for just a landing page, it's a lot less clicks. I don't think I did a very good job of explaining that, but nonetheless, ads aren't the most effective method for growing your show. What is much more effective is getting on other people's shows, because that way you already know that they're a podcast listener because they're listening to somebody else's show. This is another way that YouTube actually can be rather beneficial, because your episodes can show up as recommended videos, and people might, while they're surfing around on YouTube, see your episode or maybe see a snippet or a clip from your episode, which I talk about in our content repurposing modules. I don't know why I'm calling it modules. I have other videos and other content on content repurposing, and that's where we cover that. And by the way, if you want to learn more about content repurposing, in the Flowster marketplace, we actually have an entire playbook for that, and we'll put a link to that in the description of this video, because it makes content repurposing really, really easy. So to sum up, make sure that you're relying on more than organic social media promotion. And then mistake number 5, which I already number 6, man, I can't even count today. Number 6 is not repurposing your content. So for years, I also did this. I would produce an episode and, it would get shared on Twitter a couple of times, and it would get shared on LinkedIn a couple of times, and it would get shared on Facebook a couple of times, but that was really it. And then we kind of went on to do the next episode. And now, thanks to this content repurposing playbook that we have available, social media video content engine, that's the name for it in the Flowster marketplace, that is just absolute black magic, because what it is, it's a complete system that allows you, or ideally your VA, to take your episodes and chop them up into all sorts of little clips and audiograms and so forth that you can then put on Instagram, and you can put on Twitter, and you can put on LinkedIn, and you can put on YouTube, and you can get literally dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of social media posts from one single episode, which, as you might imagine, more posts creates more opportunities to capture more eyeballs. And again, there will be a link to that. If you're an existing Flowster user, that playbook is absolutely free. And if you're not yet a Flowster user, you'll find that Flowster is very, very inexpensive, with plans starting at the time of this filming, starting at about $29 a month. All right, so here's my big secret about podcasting, by the way. It is, without a doubt, the very best networking tool on planet Earth. I like it better than going to conferences, because I can literally take out like my laser pointer and say, oh, I want to know that person, or I want to know that person. And if you don't have a podcast, cold emailing a stranger to say, hey, can I have an hour of free advice, generally speaking, doesn't work very well. However, if you change the wording if you have a podcast and you change the wording of your email to something along the lines of, hey, I would love to have you on my show, the chances of them engaging with you go up exponentially, and you're still going to get your free hour of consulting. So in the headline of this video, we talked about I talk about $1 million from my podcast. So I want to tell you exactly how that happened. So remember I mentioned podcasting is a fantastic networking tool. I used it to build a relationship with an affiliate that then subsequently for several years promoted my flagship product, and I made $1 million over roughly about a 2.5 year period as a result of that one affiliate. So had I not had a podcast, I would not have had that $1 million, and that was a life-changing $1 million, I can assure you. So it is really, really the very best networking tool. And when you have a podcast, we do this thing called a podcast swap, where I'll go to somebody else that has a podcast and I'll say to them, hey, how about you interview me and I interview you, and we call it a podcast swap. And it is a very effective way to grow your audience. All right, so let's do the summary. Mistake number one, no editorial calendar. Mistake number two, lack of consistency. Mistake number three, lack of choosing a specific target audience. Mistake number, I don't know if I can count today, but mistake number 4 is producing your show in audio only. Mistake number 5 is not doing sufficient social media promotion. And mistake number 6 is not repurposing your content. In other words, chopping it up into all sorts of little clips that can then be spread around on social media to increase your awareness and your engagement and your views and your downloads and all the good stuff that you want. All right, so if you've enjoyed this video, I would give you a virtual high five if you would take a moment right now and click that like button, because it's kind of like my tip jar. It's your way of telling me, hey Trent, I really liked your video, and it simultaneously tells YouTube, hey, this was a really great video and you should probably show it to some other people. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment and doing that right now, just go click, click, click. I would really appreciate it. The other thing I would love it if you would do, if you have a question or a comment or some feedback or a tip of your own, leave that right below in the comments, because that also is a great engagement signal that tells YouTube that this is a great video. Plus, I like to read them and I like to give answers. So would love it if you would do that. As I mentioned, all the links will be in the description below. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.